Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 108, or as it's otherwise known, They Call Me Sheev Part 2. We're back to do our Palpatine episode that we've been talking about doing for like 6 weeks, the second half of it. So this one's going to be all about Sheev, Palpatine in the original trilogy and potentially in the sequel trilogy. So to talk about all things Palpatine, joining me tonight, as always, is Ryan. How you doing, Ryan?
Great. I love that you referred to this as They Call Me Sheev Part 2, as in that was like a long anticipated sequel. And it's like this ridiculous reference to a Teenage Bottle Rocket song about Minecraft.
Yeah.
It's a very dumb joke.
But let's not suggest our fan base has not been clamoring for this second episode. You know what I mean? It is a big sequel in that regard.
Yeah, and like the best part about this episode is I haven't prepared for it at all.
Okay, well,
like I've literally done nothing to prepare for this, and it's been like a month and a half.
No, you've been preparing your whole life, Ryan, and it's going to be good. It's going to be good. We've got some good notes. I think you did all the prep on the first part, so it's only natural that I've done all the prep on the second. So, I mean, actually, it'll work out really well.
Yeah, I'm seeing the notes for the first time right now, and there's a lot of words there, and I think those words look good.
You actually did add a few things to these notes when we thought we were going to make this one episode instead of two, but we went on for too long, if you can believe it, after this introduction. So why don't we jump in? Let's talk about Palpatine in the original trilogy. So actually, Ryan, the very first note on this document is from you, and it's about the fact that Palpatine, at some point around the original, actually before the original trilogy era, founded the Inquisitors to hunt down the remnants of the Jedi. And so that would be sort of, because our last episode was all about sort of Palpatine and his machinations and all that stuff in the prequel era, but we ended it by discussing, the final moments of Revenge of the Sith and that sort of thing. So just kind of following his life and story kind of chronologically here. I mean, that is where it would kick off, probably, really, is like after Revenge of the Sith, in terms of like what we've seen, at least on screen anyway. It's like this whole Inquisitor program that's meant to help him and Darth Vader extinguish the Jedi, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah, and just like they're extinguishing the Jedi because like those, like the Jedi could be potential threats, but like, I mean, like he's also like he's in about halfway through A New Hope, like he like abolishes the Galactic Senate. Like and I think that's like this kind of stuff is what makes Palpatine such a good villain. And like not all of this stuff was like stuff that George wrote in in the 70s and stuff, but as we've layered onto like his character throughout the years, like he's not just like this like single motivation villain. Like, I don't know, like you look at like most of our villains in like pop culture, and like, I mean, people could argue about this with me, but like, like Thanos or, like any other like genre villain happening right now, like they have this like one single goal, and like they have this one plan to do it. But like with Palpatine, like he's like, yeah, I'm doing like all this political stuff on the side, but like on this other side, I also have a plan to deal with these like superheroes, like the Jedi. And I think that's just like what makes him like so interesting and cool as a villain. And, especially in the context we're looking at him now, potentially, I mean, playing some sort of role in episode 9.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And it's also really interesting too, because like, as you pointed out sort of there, he kind of started out as one of the villains that you're describing in a way. I mean, I still think he was really interesting and cool in the original trilogy, but he was sort of one dimensional in terms of like his, desires and things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we'll talk about how he was kind of playing Darth Vader, and the seeds of that are, I guess the seeds aren't the right word, but the sort of evidence of that is there in the original trilogy. But obviously, that's expanded upon so much in the prequel. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of funny too to talk about, Palpatine this way after doing the whole episode about the prequel era version of him, because he is so rich and layered in
Mm-hmm.
that version of Palpatine. And then it's sort of like now we watch the original trilogy, and then we think about that stuff as we think about Palpatine, but like as it was on the screen in 70, well, no, in 80 and 83 especially,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't quite all that much to him in that way. But even still, I think he was compelling, because he was this like twisted up old guy in a robe, and then all of a sudden he's shooting lightning out of his fingers. You know what I mean? It was like, yes, he was like a sort of, in terms of his desires or whatever, he was, fairly one dimensional, like, you know, um, typical villain. But I don't know, he didn't look powerful, and he, I guess he was like the sorcerer type villain or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So, which it's not like that had never been seen before. But yeah,
Yeah.
on the whole Inquisitor thing, like you said, I mean, like it demonstrates that he's always got like lots of things going on. He's got contingency
Mm-hmm.
plans, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit here. But he's always got a couple different irons in the fire, So whether that's Dooku with eyes on Anakin, looking to replace Dooku, or maybe even Maul, looking to replace Maul eventually with Anakin. Like, he always has something kind of, or multiple things kind of going on, in the Inquisitors, I suppose, are an example of that. And just on a quick side note, because we're really good at being quick with our side notes, tomorrow we're
Mm-hmm.
going to see some footage of the Jedi Fallen Order, and that will be bringing the Inquisitors back to the forefront of Star Wars fandom and discussion, and that should be really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, oh, yeah, I don't know. Let's just keep moving on, because there's like so much I could say just like about like this era, but we gotta get to some of the other stuff.
We should keep going, but shout out to the Grand Inquisitor, because I thought he was fantastic. And the Inquisitors, the other ones are cool too, but I really loved the Grand Inquisitor myself. So
I like Sarah Michelle Gellar.
okay, yeah, she was cool too.
I like her Inquisitor
Okay,
a lot,
all
and I
right.
wonder if that's the one. I don't know how, like, it's
No,
so she's not the one in Fallen Order,
no, no.
right?
I forget
Okay,
what number they gave her, but it is another. It's a different number, because they talked about that a little bit at the panel at
okay,
Celebration. So yeah.
okay.
Yep. Cool. Well, let's jump into the original trilogy. And I mean, obviously the first thing to kind of discuss as far as Palpatine goes, and the larger narrative with him, is that he is like his goal in, well, really, why don't we start with The Empire Strikes Back? Because we see him briefly in The Empire Strikes Back, and he's just very mysterious at that point, but he is talking to Vader about Skywalker, and being able to kind of manipulate that situation, which is par for the course for him. But like a brief appearance in Empire Strikes Back, and then obviously, we'll get a lot more of him in Return of the Jedi. I did actually watch the original Palpatine appearance in the Empire Strikes Back before we recorded part one of They Call Me
Mm.
Sheev, but it's not so fresh in my mind anymore. But I mean, like the original actor and the original makeup and all that stuff, and the original lines
The
even.
monkey eyes, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So things have been changed a little bit now in the special edition, which we're more familiar with. I think both of us are anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that way more times at this point than the original version. But
Mhm.
I mean, to me, the big thing with the Empire Strikes Back is that the Emperor's there in the one scene, and communicating with Vader, and it's just really kind of making it clear that there is a sort of mastermind that's kind of pulling the strings, which is, like Palpatine to a T. So I guess that's where we start in the original trilogy, but it's fairly. I mean, even knowing what we know about him from the prequels and Return of the Jedi and everything, I think that scene is very plot driven, and there's not it doesn't, I don't know. It's cool. It's an awesome scene. But I feel like the meat of the discussion as far as Palpatine goes in the original trilogy is Return of the Jedi for sure.
Yep.
Okay. So in Jedi, the big thing with Palpatine is him attempting to manipulate Luke, which again is straight out of like Palpatine's playbook. That's what he always does. He's done time and time again. And this is our first kind of the first time we really see it on screen, but it's what defines his character. So and he's pretty good. He's pretty good at doing that, obviously. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'd say almost successful with Luke, but he gets close to kind of having his way with Luke and manipulating Luke in the same way he did, Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. But obviously the story of the original trilogy there is that Luke is able to, kind of overcome that with the help of Vader and, all that kind of stuff. So, but of course it is straight out of Palpatine's playbook to try to manipulate Luke in the ways that he does.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to like wonder, like he only has like a few moments with Luke in Jedi, whereas like he had basically a lifetime with Anakin.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. That is a great point, and it's interesting because I feel like, oh well, as you started to say it, I'm like, no, Luke is the one who could withstand that. Like Luke is the one who's less selfish, etc. Than Anakin, because I have a clear preference, for Luke over Anakin, even like hero Anakin. But the amount of time that he spent with him is a great point. And then also like if you think about like, well, what if Luke had shown up on Cloud City and the Emperor had been there as well, and the Emperor was able to spend some time with Luke in that time in Luke's life? Would Luke have been able to withstand the manipulation of Palpatine in that scenario? And I don't know. I think I don't know. Maybe he could have. He did throw himself off of that like weather vane or whatever it was to avoid, kind of being, I don't know, what would you say? Like Vader kind of grabbing hold of him and sort of, having control over him or whatever. He did choose to throw himself off of that weather vane, but that was just Darth Vader, not Palpatine. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as like that whole situation with Luke, it is like, this is when we see Palpatine fail. You know what I mean? Because we spent so much time in the last episode talking about him and his, machinations and his manipulations and all that kind of stuff. And we see it again here in Return of the Jedi, except for in this case, he's not successful. So it is one of those things where, you're coming to the end, we thought anyways, of that character's arc, and you're seeing that like, finally once after so many successful orchestrations and manipulations, and in this one case, he's not able to do it. And so that's kind of the thing with that. But again, he comes so close, and there's that moment when his face turns. It's like Luke throws the lightsaber down and it's the best moment in Star Wars. It's like the best moment in any movie ever. But Luke throws the lightsaber down, and he says, "I'm a Jedi like my father before me." And there's that look on Palpatine's face, like you see his face turn, and it's like, so be it, Jedi. And it's like, ooh, I'm so mad right now. Like this never happens to me,
Yeah.
I'm always a couple steps ahead. So, so what a great moment. But, Yeah, and I guess like as far as what he's attempting to accomplish there, I mean, this is all very obvious and everyone knows, but he's really trying to replace Vader with a newer model, an upgrade, a less damaged version of the pupil or whatever you want to say, and that's so manipulative and so yeah, I don't know. It's just so dishonest and again so Palpatine. Knowing kind of how he brought Vader there in the first place, how he ruined Vader, on every level, only then to eventually want to toss him aside in those final moments. But that was probably always part of the plan.
Yeah.
In the same way that he probably always planned. Well, for sure, he always planned to throw Dooku away, etc. So.
And Darth Maul.
Yeah, and who knows who else, but yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, other things from the original trilogy, I think one of the things that I love about the Emperor in general, but also especially in the original trilogy, is the way he's kind of presented as this like mysterious sort of like dark magician, mystical type thing. And I like you see that a little bit in Empire, but I mean, mainly he's, a mystery, I guess you'd say, in Empire. But then, like, once you get into Return of the Jedi, I feel like he's just like this evil wizard character in all the best ways. And, I don't know. What do you think in terms of like, if we're ranking, I mean, not like literally ranking with numbers, but, if we're kind of mentally ranking here, the power of the Force users we see like in that original trilogy, like, is it fair to say that he was being presented as the most powerful of the Force users we'd seen on screen in the original trilogy?
I don't know if he was the most powerful Force user in the OT, but he definitely wielded the most power because he, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, he had, like what, like, political scientists refer to as like hard power and soft power, where like he had control of like governments and like he had the power of fear with the Death Star and but then he also like could shoot lightning out of his hands and stuff and like send armies to places. So like really, and I mean it's crazy, like it's all this stuff that like we've already, like I feel like we've always known, but like I've never really had the conversation about like, dang, Palpatine like really played his cards right for a really long time, until now. But like he really did, like, and like it's when you think about, and again, like real world parallels, like it's it's hard for like a teacher to control a classroom. It's hard for a mayor to control a city. It's hard for, a governor to control a state. It's hard for a president to control a country. Like, and that's kind of where it stops with our, like the government that we understand. But like, I can't imagine having like a leader of Earth and then like taking that to like the most insane next level of like a leader of the galaxy. And like it's just like all the things that he did right for so long to get to that point. Like he's absolutely the most powerful character ever that we know of in the Star Wars universe.
I wish I could remember the name of the famous chess player, the famous Russian chess player that had to play against the computer, or it didn't have to, but did that. Because like Palpatine's like a creepy version of him, you know what I mean? Because like
it starts with a K. I don't know how to
Yeah.
pronounce it, but it's not Bobby Fischer.
Is it Kasparov or something like that? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I keep thinking of the name of the guy that created Tetris, and I'm like, nope, that's not
Oh,
it. Alexei
uh, Pav.
Petra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it
I
was in
heard
my
it.
head.
I actually heard it pronounced on a podcast like a few years ago, like a Retronauts about Tetris, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Whoa, that was nothing like the name that was in my head for all
That you
these
were
years."
when you were reading it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't have time to talk about him or Hank, the guy that bought the rights to Tetris or whatever, the Texas dude. But anyway, I was trying to say that like Palpatine's like a creepy version of him in the sense that like galactic chess, he's so good at it, you know, like to
Yeah.
be able to control all these little pieces and manipulate them and sort of place things, you know, like uh, in the prequels, you know, to be able to sort of, you know, control you know, if I set up this trade dispute, you know, I'll see the fruits of that years down the road, and you know, just the way everything kind of lines up with his plans and machinations and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess in that sense he is. But I was thinking like in terms of force powers, you know, and it's an interesting discussion because it's like, well, of course the Jedi, you know, they're not able to control things in the same way that Palpatine is. You know, they can't control the galaxy as successfully as him. But then it's like, well, they wouldn't try, you know, which is not that I think that they could either. But you know, it's like Palpatine's has this incredible power to control things and to, you know, shape things and to make things, as Anakin would say, the way he wants them to be. And it's like that is his strength, and that is the quality that defines him as a character. But that's also a defect, you know. I mean, primarily it's a defect. It's like that's a problem. And that is like he's defined by something awful, you know, which I think a villain, you know, probably should be, right? So it works really well. But yeah, it's like when you talk about like, well, is he more powerful than the Jedi? I mean, yeah, you know, for the reasons that you listed there, but it's also like, well, that's what makes the Jedi better than him. You know what I mean? That's what makes him the villain, and them the heroes is because you know, they shouldn't anyways be trying to control things. And we actually saw that in that theme kind of explored in Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray earlier this year. You know, the concept of you know, Qui-Gon being like, well, there's these prophecies that are really interesting, but kind of coming to a realization, I think, at some point in that book, you know, that like, well, it's okay maybe to be interested in this stuff. It's maybe okay to try to learn from this stuff, but to use it to try to control things is probably not the way to go. Whereas then like Dooku, you know, he became enveloped in a desire to know the future and control the future, as did Anakin, etc. So I think like, you know, that's one of the kind of key differences between a character like Palpatine and then our heroic characters is that, you know, I think George and Star Wars and whatever would indicate that, you know, wanting to control things and shape things, the outcome of things is not a healthy or positive trait.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that is like the, you know, the crux of Anakin's story, and you know, this is like something that was really well explored in The Last Jedi with like a lot of Luke's misgivings about the Jedi Order. And then, like he called out like a lot of the failings and the downfall of the Jedi Order, and you know why he initially thought it should end. But then, you know, in the last scene, like he also, you know, saw something in Rey that made him think like, no, like I won't be the last Jedi. Like this person is going to continue it. And I think I don't know, like that's something that's like, it's cool that like we're exploring this now, kind of. And also like, again, like everything is like as shocking as things have been in like the moments, like when you step back from them, like, you know, the stuff in Last Jedi and, you know, what we're seeing now with Palpatine in episode 9, like as we've been talking through this, you know, like, you know, I just kind of talk through like why, you know, I believe that Palpatine is the most powerful person ever in Star Wars in this like galaxy of like incredibly powerful people with like these superhuman powers that are like all on this like epic scale. And then like, yeah, I mean, like when you think about it that way, like why 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 would he have just died falling down a reactor? Like why would that have been the end of his story? Like, I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, he didn't die there. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't. Life and death in Star Wars is so like abstract at this point. Like, it barely even matters if someone's dead or alive, really. Um, because like, it's like, oh man, Luke died in that last movie. I wonder what role he'll play in episode 9. Like, these are like actual conversations we have. But it's like, you know, we talk about like these plans that he's had and like how he's been playing this like 4-dimensional chess for so long, and like how he got this impossible power. Like the Emperor of the Galaxy is like, oh, that's like a cool like Buck Rogers term. But then like when you actually spend time in this universe and you see like all these different planets and the people and like the problems they have and all this stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, that one dude rules over all this, and like he hatched this plan to make that happen like over the course of decades. Like it's so insane. And so yeah, then when it comes to like, wait, how could Palpatine be in episode 9? It's almost like, oh, well, how could he not be in episode 9?
Yeah, no, I think for sure, and we may have mentioned this on the last show about Palpatine, but I think it's like it's one of those things where it's like I'm there in Chicago, you know, in the convention center, and I'm seeing that trailer for the first time, and I'm hearing that laugh, and I can't believe this. It's crazy. It's so out of, oh my God, I never, you know, and then like you just give it a little time and you say, it makes more sense than anything in the world. I mean, it makes so much sense. Like nothing makes more sense than Palpatine actually being, everything about like him trying to control everything, even after death. Is what defines that character. Palpatine's machinations and attempts to control things are what define this entire saga. And, you know, like in you know, Revenge of the Sith, he's talking about, you know, cheating death. And yeah, it makes so much sense. I mean, maybe if you look just in the context of the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy and you discount the prequels, maybe not as much. But once you bring the prequels into it, it's so logical. It makes so much sense. And it's just like, it just feels so much like the right thing to do to wrap up this 9-part, you know, series. But I didn't, you know, I mean, like, actually it's funny because I don't think you were in Chicago yet, but we were like driving around in Oak Park, you know, going to get food or do whatever on either the Wednesday or the Thursday night when we first got to Celebration. And I've probably shared this story on the podcast already, but it was me and Dan and Chris, I think. And we were talking, I don't know if you were there or not, Ryan. I don't think so. We were talking about like, you know, crazy theories and like what might happen in you know, what we might find out about episode 9 or whatever. And just the concept of Palpatine came up, and it was like, you know, I was like, well, I'm not putting, you know, I'm not saying I think it's likely, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if Palpatine was in this movie. And it was either Chris or Dan or maybe both of them, I don't remember, but we're like, dude, come on, that's crazy, you know, like you're way out and, you know, like wild theory territory. And it was like, well, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, but you know, he was trying to avoid death, and that guy's kind of like the thing in the prequels, and then it's like we saw it the next day, and it was like, no way. But again, it's just when you think about it, you know, and I wasn't thinking, like I said, I wasn't thinking it was super likely, but it's just like, all the seeds are there. I mean, all the evidence is there. And like, once you put all those, because I'm not like Palpatine, you know what I mean? I can't see all these things from 10 years ahead of time. I can't put all the pieces together like that. But once, you know, they're kind of laid out for us, it's just like, it makes so much sense, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's something real quick, Ryan, that you said too that I thought was so interesting, which is like, you know, that was Anakin's downfall, is wanting to control things. And we know that, you know, we know that like his downfall was wanting to control what happened with Padme, and like not being able to accept that, you know, things might not, you know, go the way that he wanted them to. And Yoda takes a lot of heat from people. I hear people always talking about like, and I've probably said it myself, but Yoda takes a lot of heat, I feel like, from when Anakin comes to see him in Revenge of the Sith and is like, hey, what do I do, Yoda? Because I'm scared I might lose somebody I love. And Yoda's just like, yeah, well, you just got to train yourself not to care about that, you know? And people are like, that is so dumb. You turned him to the dark side, Yoda. Like, that's the worst advice ever. And it's like, it's not very artfully communicated to Anakin. But at the same time, like, it's really true in a lot of ways. It's like, you know, if he could have just trained himself not to want to be in control of what happens, to be able to accept that like he's not the one who gets to decide if he loses that person or not, then you know, so much could have been avoided. And then it was really, though, what I was thinking is like when you pointed that out about you know, that being Anakin's downfall, and you know, again, like we know that, but just to hear it phrased that way, it's when you think about like Luke in that moment and like bringing that back to the look on Palpatine's face, like the shock or the anger at the idea that like I didn't get to control the outcome of this situation. It's like Anakin's downfall was insisting on trying to control things and shape things the way he wanted them to be. And then Luke's sort of redeeming quality, or Luke's, you know, greatest heroic quality was the idea that he was willing to say, I can't control it. You know what I mean? Like to be passive, to throw the lightsaber down and say, I can't make you do what I want you to do. You know, I can't make my father do what he wants to do. But what I can say is that like, I won't, you know, contribute to this or whatever. And, you know, we're not going to get into The Last Jedi now, but then when people say it's not my Luke Skywalker, it's like, it so is your Luke Skywalker. It really is. It couldn't more perfectly be your Luke Skywalker, but you just don't know who your Luke Skywalker is, I feel like.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
speaking...
Also, like, I think, like, I want to, you know, sit with this for a minute because, you know, I think like people take, and you were just literally referring to this, people take a lot of different things out of Star Wars and they get a lot of different things out of it. You get, like, I got way different things out of it when I was a kid and when I was a middle schooler and when I was a high schooler than I do now in my mid 30s. And, you know, my, you know, my appreciation of the films has like changed over the years. Like there's so much stuff that, which is again, like why there are like 80,000 Star Wars podcasts, because like this really dumb space laser swords thing, like actually, I don't know if it's even there at this point, but like we just keep finding subtext and thematic elements, and like it just keeps building. And like I don't know, like I still like honestly think that this like Star Wars is going to go down as our generation's like Beowulf, as far as like this is our story from like this, you know, like these centuries. But anyway, I think like exploring this concept of control is like it's one of those like crazy George teaching us moments where we're like, oh, there's that guy in his sneakers and his flannels again. Crazy George making weird aliens. But like he's actually teaching like one of like the strongest themes that have like ever been committed to film, or like an art medium in general, whereas like this idea of like control being a downfall, like it's, you know, it's not the first time this has been explored in art, but the way it's presented, especially in the prequels, of like, and then like you think of the real world applications, like how many people ruin relationships because of control issues, how many people like end up doing horrible things and, you know, lose their jobs or in jail because of fear of like losing their job. And, you know, it like it's so, and like power, like I mean, we are like, I mean, we're in the midst in America, like having this like giant legal discussion about in these legal proceedings about like how people gain power and what means they go to get it and how they maintain that power. And, you know, a lot of people who were really thirsty for power a few years ago are now like in jail because of that, and because of like the stuff they did and like trying to like control and hold on to that. And like when like, yeah, like you can get there, like you can hold it for like a period of time by doing like all these awful things, but like you can't forever. And like, and that's, and like there's going to be consequences to that, and like all of the sacrifices that Anakin made in, you know, episode 2 and episode 3 to like have that control, have that power, and then like, you know, he ends like this broken half man like at the end of it. Like, oh, it's so powerful.
It absolutely is, yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about Star Wars is like I feel like there's so many great popcorn movies and action movies and, you know, epic movies and stuff like that. You know, over the last couple decades or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like Star Wars is pretty unique in terms of, you know, like you said, Ryan, how your interpretation of them and your understanding of them and like the way you react to them and stuff has changed so much over the years, and how you keep coming back to them, or not you, but like we all keep coming back to them and finding new things and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if that's true of most movies like this. I feel like it's not, you know, and I feel like that there's, I don't even know if it's intentional necessarily well, I guess it is, but it's just like all these elements have come together in a way that creates this really rich and interesting story. And um, if it was like, you know, you just understood it as much as you were ever going to understand it after the first viewing, when you walked out of the theater, it would be something temporary, you know. But I think it, you know, clearly Star Wars has proven to be something that's very lasting as far as our culture goes. And I think it's because it's rich enough, it's deep enough, and because you know, George created it with some of these big ideas in mind. That and because and like you said, because he chose to go back and expand upon these mythos with the prequels as well, because there's a great story there in the original trilogy, and it is rich, and there is a lot that we can, you know, kind of continue to dig into just in the original trilogy alone. But without the prequels, there's a lot less in the original trilogy, I think. And without the sequels, I think eventually too, we're going to say the same thing, you know? So like all of it together, it continues to expand. But even from the beginning, it was built, you know, on this foundation of, you know, being didactic and sort of like, you know, teaching these larger lessons and sort of being a fairy tale, like a modern fairy tale. But you know, again, there's this complexity to it where we can continue to kind of, you know, analyze it and look at, you know, the way the story is being told, and the way certain ideas are being seeded and then developed and expanded and all that really makes it something unique, I think. So
Yeah, and I think like the, you know, George set this like insanely high bar with the original trilogy and eventually the prequels of like being so rich in themes that like like it's crazy. Like Star Wars is like this present that we got like, you know, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and like it just like it keeps opening like there's then we like find these other like little presents inside the presents like as we get older, and we're like, oh, I didn't know how to unwrap this bow before, but now like, oh, here's this other present that has come with like all my life experiences and all the other entertainment I've consumed and like the people I've known and, you know, all this stuff. And it's so wonderful. And I think like the people who get that and experience Star Wars in that same way, I think those are the people that like, you know, like Kathleen Kennedy and like the higher ups at Lucasfilm, like they have a really good eye for the people who get it. And that's why I think like our new canon for like books and everything has, to me, it's felt a lot more overall like consistently like rich and satisfying. And the fact that they're, you know, going back to these authors like, you know, like Claudia Gray, and who like really just like understand it on like the same sort of frequency as George. And, you know, and I think like Ryan Johnson is another one, and JJ, and like, and, you know, like we're getting like the laser swords, but we're also getting like these themes that, you know, give us new areas to unpack, but also like expand on George's vision and like give us new angles to look at what George created.
I mean, it's the most important thing that there is for Star Wars storytelling in the future of Star Wars, that, you know, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Ryan Johnson, you know, Kiri Hart, all the people at Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni, you know, Carrie Beck, all the people at Lucasfilm that are kind of, you know, very involved in the direction of Star Wars, etc. It's the most important thing there is, that they understand, you know, the importance of getting it right, and that they have that reverence for the kind of storytelling that will resonate, you know, over time. That's critical to them, and even to Disney. I mean, like, so many. It's weird because like I was just reading. I've been reading the Han Solo Icons, Star Wars Icons Han Solo book, which is really great, and I recommend it. It's really good. But anytime I read about, you know, the making of Star Wars in 75 and 76, it's just like there are so many things that could have not panned out or worked out. And we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this right now, and it wouldn't have made the impact it did, and it wouldn't have been as good as it was. And there's just so many different ways it could go wrong. And now I'm like looking at this current era of Star Wars storytelling, and it's like, well, if Kathleen Kennedy wasn't in charge and, you know, wasn't the genius that she is, like, this could have gone really bad. If the company that George sold Lucasfilm to didn't have the restraint and the ability to kind of let Lucasfilm be Lucasfilm, and to kind of let Star Wars to place importance on it in a way that they have, then things could have gone really wrong. And, you know, they're not perfect, and they're a big corporation and whatever. I mean, they rushed Solo, I think. I think they kind of rushed it worked out because it's amazing, but I think they almost like they pushed Force Awakens back 6 months, but even that, I feel like they were rushing it. You know what I mean? It was like, okay, well, I guess we can't have it by May.
Out of the oven.
I guess we can't have it by May like we wanted to, but we're going to have it by December, rather than sort of like allowing the movie to come out when it needed to come out, you know, when it could have come out or whatever. But
yeah.
But overall, I just feel like they could be doing a lot more to like drive this thing into the ground, and they could be, they could be taking fewer risks in terms of storytelling. And I think they understand, like, no, it has to be meaningful. It can't just be a cool movie, you know. It can't be Jurassic World. And that's like, Jurassic World's fine. It's not a bad movie. It's cool. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Like, I went to see it and it was like, this is the thrilling dinosaur movie, kind of like Jurassic Park, you know, but it doesn't resonate with me. It's not sticking with me. You know what I mean? And it would have been so easy to misunderstand what Star Wars is and, you know, produce movies that don't resonate but are perfectly fine movies. But that's not good enough. You know what I mean? And have we done the thing where we kind of get off off on a tangent? But it is all really, I mean, but it is all related to Palpatine, because like Palpatine is in so many ways, like in the same way that like Luke and Anakin and now Rey are like the core of this story. Like Palpatine is the core of this as well. It's because he's such a rich and complex, villain, and because we're still finding out now in 2019 all the ways in which he's been kind of controlling all of this, and all the ways in which like this is continuing to develop that the Star Wars is what it is. So why don't we jump in, Ryan, to talking about Palpatine in the sequels and how we think that's going to go, which we're, close to an hour in, and that's probably the bigger of the two discussions we're going to have tonight. But why don't we jump into that? So the first thing that you put down in the notes, again, Ryan, you say you didn't contribute, but here we are looking at the link that you placed here into Palpatine's contingency plan, which I have to be honest with you, I find it kind of confusing a little bit, but very interesting still. So, and this is something that nobody would know about this if they haven't read the comics and read the books, especially Aftermath and stuff like that. If you go see The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi in the movie theater, you really have no idea that Palpatine had a contingency plan. I guess if you play Battlefront 2, it's definitely part of that story as well. But in terms of like the film storytelling, this whole contingency plan isn't really touched on at all. Maybe in novelizations, but again, if you're watching the movies and those are like the text, like primary text or whatever, you don't even really know about this. But it's one of those things where to me it's like, okay, well, this is a expanded universe or whatever, kind of story element, but it's one that it doesn't feel, how do I put this? It feels like it is supporting what's on the screen in a way that's very natural versus, somebody's writing a book 15 years after Return of the Jedi came out and they're going to write about the kids that Han and Leia had. There's evidence that might happen, but it's not really something that's directly supporting the storytelling in that movie. It's more like, what can I do with what's already happened, versus this contingency plan is, I think, a very logical and sort of well thought out explanation of why things are the way they are in the movies.
And I think like it should also be noted for people like who don't dive into this stuff, like there isn't like a book that is like Palpatine's plan that like you can just like go and grab and read.
That'd be a good
like
book, though.
This they probably could create a thing, and they probably will. Who knows how all this is going to play out. But like what's great about the contingency is that it was just like, it's just been lightly threaded in for like the last, 4-5 years. Like, wait, when did Force Awakens come out?
Yeah, almost 4 years ago. Like, 2015 at the end of the year.
15. Okay, yeah. So, like the last 4 years, because this basically started a few months before The Force Awakens came out. And there were just things that were mentioned in the comics, in the books. Like, and it wasn't the same author, and there was never like a point where like it was like it wasn't like another like section like at the end of a book. It's like, okay, well now we've told our main story. Here's Palpatine's plan, part 7. Like it was just like these little things, and like it was done so well that you never really noticed it. Like, and I don't think we ever had a conversation like on the show or in text or anything about this stuff until the episode 9 trailer. Am I mistaken on that?
I don't know. I mean, we might have talked about it a little bit when we were talking about Battlefront 2, I would think, because Project Cinder is what it's called, right? Or at least that's part of it.
Yeah.
We might have talked about it a little bit, but yeah, it's like, especially after hearing his laugh at the end of the episode 9 trailer, but even before that, it is really integral to the storytelling of the sequel era, you know, because it is why we have a first order and how that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not something that really, yeah, that we talked about much at all, or that was, I wouldn't say it's in the forefront of the consciousness of the storytelling, but I like that, and I think it's smart, and I think it's the same thing they're doing with Snoke, and even with Kylo Ren to a certain extent, is to say, we're not going to fill in all these blanks until, if ever, until the movies are done. Those 3 movies are done, because we don't want to back those filmmakers into a corner unnecessarily. So we've learned enough about this plan that it's like, okay, well, you know, why is there a first order? How is there a first order? Well, it makes sense. And, you know, it has to come from the Empire. So how does it come from the Empire? And, you know, the whole contingency plan and Operation Cinder and all that, it works really well to tell that story. But at the same time, don't tell more than you have to, because it could change, you know?
Yeah. And I think like, I don't think we need to like read through and explain what all this stuff is, because like it would basically, to just like go through it, it's just like a list of things that you can find on Wikipedia. Just look for contingency and Operation Cinder. But like if you really want to kind of explore this stuff in like a natural way, which I think is like kind of the better way to approach it, is I would say Chuck Wendig's Aftermath trilogy, um, Greg Rucka's 4-issue Shattered Empire comic series for Marvel, and then, as you mentioned, Battlefront 2. If you play through the story mode of that game, and then what else? A lot of Charles Soule's Marvel work. And like this is where it gets really crazy, because Charles Soule is a genius, and he he wrote the Poe Dameron series, which I think he's like best known for within Star Wars. But guess what? Like none of this stuff is in there. It's in his 5-issue Lando series, which I just reread, because I did not even catch any of this the first time I read it, because that's not what you're looking for when you're reading a Lando Calrissian series. And then it comes in, it comes in a bit more in his Darth Vader run after Kieran Gillen's run finished. His Charles Soule's Darth Vader run jumped time periods to like the dark times between episode 3 and episode 4, and like some of the stuff that he did in there, like there's a lot of people saying like, oh, maybe this is how the Emperor returns in episode 9. So I would highly recommend that stuff. And I don't know, like I think a lot of it is like, it's kind of like exposition and plot, and like giving you some things to think about, but it definitely doesn't like fully explore or confirm anything. But like I don't know, I think definitely there's definitely some big ideas in
Well,
all of this, and it could inform what happens in episode 9, or it could not.
yeah, maybe not. But what I love about this whole thing, and it's more of like an aesthetic thing or like a feeling, a vibe, sort of, I guess you'd say. But it's like it's all kind of creepy, and it has this sort of
Mm-hmm.
like I was saying in Return of the Jedi. I feel like you really get like this like evil magic type feeling from the Emperor in that movie, and I think you're really getting that with all the stuff that you're sort of describing, and like even in simple ways or subtle ways. But like for instance, part of the whole contingency thing is like, well, we're gonna make it look like the Empire is defeated, but really our best and our brightest are going to be hiding in the unknown regions, and we will be sort of developing a new empire, a first order out of that, but we're going to do it in the shadows and where nobody can see that it's happening. And so we're playing the long game. And how Palpatine is that, to play the long game, to kind of like, present one thing, oh, the Empire's dead, when in fact it was all part of the plan and it's something else going on, elsewhere. And so like, but the fact that it's like, oh, well, they're hiding in the unknown regions, like that's creepy. The unknown regions are creepy,
Yeah. Also, to add to that creepiness, they are going around the galaxy, kidnapping children and taking them to the unknown regions to raise as soldiers.
Yeah, that's really creepy. It's not like the fun creepy, like, the unknown regions, but it is creepy. It's unsettling. It's evil for sure. Yeah, so that's part of it. And then also, some of the stuff you're talking about, like in the comics and even in the Aftermath books with like the acolytes. Is it the acolytes of the Beyond? Is that what it's called? Of the what now? The Beyond?
Yeah, the people who are like obsessed with like Sith artifacts and stuff.
But is it the acolytes of the Beyond?
I don't remember what their name is.
I feel like it is, but maybe I made that up. But like,
fine.
How pregnant is that
might
word?
have just been like the cult you were in high school.
Could have been that too, but like, I can make a comment now, but I won't, about the cult I was in high school. But anyway, no. Like no, I wasn't in that. I like the Beyond though. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oof, man, if that's what it's actually called, and I'm not misremembering that, like how pregnant is that? How much of a hint or a clue is that? But the fact that they're going around getting these artifacts, and that these artifacts, like there's comics where there's holocrons that contain like the spirit of some Sith or whatever. I mean, there's just so much stuff where it's like these creepy little like dark magic type things that have been threaded through a lot of the storytelling in subtle ways, maybe. But if it does come to pass that in episode 9, Palpatine's back in a way that is some kind of dark and evil magic or whatever, then all that stuff is going to be like, oh yeah, they've been kind of hinting at this or pointing us in this direction all along, but in simple and subtle ways. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and I think that like that manifests huge on the animation side too, which like there are literal witches with cauldrons and stuff happening over in Filoni's world. And like, some of that was pre the Disney buyout, but like, like that, I think that's where it was kind of established that, like, yeah, there's the Force and Force powers in Star Wars, but there's also like other things at play in certain parts of the galaxy. And when you think about it, like, yes, this is a galaxy, and like, like of course there may be different, like, if the Force can exist, like there could be other spiritual elements that exist elsewhere. But I just want to like end on this just saying that I really think all of like the dark magic and the Sith artifacts and all of that, I think it like I mean, we haven't really seen anything past this, but like it all kind of like comes to a head. It peaks in like the last probably like the last trade of Charles Soule's Darth Vader series, which is like the that's Vader's Vader building his castle, and that's like, I mean, that's just where all of it comes to a head. Like, there's a lot of that happening there, and it's great and insane. And I know you haven't read that one yet, John, but like I definitely think you should give that run a go. Like the first time I read it, I was like like this, I thought it felt really weird, and like it took like months of reading the book. It was always kind of like at the bottom of my Star Wars comics pile. It's like, well, you know, I'm subscribed to this. I guess I'm going to read it. Like, I like Charles Soule. I like his work in everything. This feels weird for Star Wars. And I don't know. But then, like, at a certain point, I was just like, okay, I got this. Like, I get it. This is weird. This is not the Star Wars I grew up on. But, like, I'm kind of feeling this. And then by the end, I'm just like, yeah, I'm in for this ride. And then I read the series again, and the second time I like truly loved it. So yeah, cool. That's a highly recommended one, and it you know, it really gives it makes a lot of the Palpatine theories that you've maybe have seen around like very, very probable.
Interesting. Okay. That's a pretty strong sell. That definitely makes me more interested in checking that out. You know, Charles Soule is great, so I would be interested anyway. But yeah, I should. You know, if you think there's some good episode 9 kind of potential, you know, support and stuff in there, then that's pretty enticing.
I guarantee that like it's not an accident that story exists. Like, whether it's a red herring, I don't know, but like there's no possible way that like this story was written without like and then like, you know, episode 9 teaser comes out and it's like, oh well, what a coincidence. Like,
right.
Yeah, there's a plan.
Huh. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting too, because if episode 9 comes out and this like dark magic, you know, kind of stuff is an important part of the plot in the movie, it may make me a little more open-minded, I guess, to some of the stuff. Like I don't know if I really loved all the Mother Tales and stuff and the Clone Wars and all that. You know, I don't think it felt very Star Wars necessarily. But as it starts to become more a part of it, and you know, if it's featured in episode 9 in a significant way, then maybe I will be more open to that. But I think too, what's interesting about it is that for me anyway, I'm open to certain things in the way they're presented in movies, but then like sometimes in comics or TV shows or whatever, they're presented in a little more like concrete or a little more obvious ways, and then I'm like less into it. So for instance, I'm thinking of like the wills in the Yoda episode and in the Lost Missions of Clone Wars or whatever it's called, and I'm like, I hate that, because you're like showing me something that in a movie would be kind of like hinted at, and like I'm good with it being sort of hinted at, you know what I mean? Same thing with the World Between Worlds in Star Wars Rebels. Like conceptually it's interesting, but like when I actually see a character walking around on a space highway, it's like a little too much for me. You know what I mean? So how's that going to play out in episode 9? How's that going to play out with this Palpatine thing? Like, are we going to see like a Palpatine ghost floating around, or like how are they going to, because some of these ideas are pretty heady. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff is pretty high concept and pretty, I don't know, it's out there, you know, and I love it. But I wonder if part of the reason I love it so much right now is because of how mysterious it is. And then like when it's turned into some like rotoscoped, green screened, like actual like effect I'm seeing on screen, like is it still going to be cool, or is like all the mystery going to be kind of like sucked out of it at that point? So I don't know. That's a rhetorical question, I guess, but it's just something I can, I think about like with this sort of thing is like almost like less is more, So I wonder what that'll be like, because it's the intrigue of it. And actually the next thing I wanted to talk about is maybe the connection between Snoke and Palpatine. And I think that's a great example of that whole thing. He started out for me in The Force Awakens as being boring and bland and uninteresting. And then with the way Rian Johnson wrote him and the way he was handled in The Last Jedi, I think he became much, much more interesting to me. And now I really like Snoke, even though he was my one disappointment after The Force Awakens. And now I really like Snoke, but it's because they've told me almost nothing about him. I feel like that's why I like him. I feel like that's a huge part of what makes him really interesting, is all the intrigue and mystery surrounding him. And I don't know that he will become a better character or that I will like him more the more they tell me about him. But in terms of like that backstory, as far as Snoke is concerned, I wonder how much of it has to do with Palpatine. And I wonder if, I kind of doubt the movie, The Rise of Skywalker episode 9 will give us much about that relationship, but I kind of wonder what we might learn about that relationship, maybe post The Rise of Skywalker. Because as I'm putting these notes together and, thinking about this stuff, it's like, well, how are they connected? Like, what do we think is the connection there? Did Snoke kind of come up through the ranks of the First Order sort of independently of Palpatine because Palpatine was already dead, etc.? Or could Snoke have been some kind of protege of Palpatine's, like another Dooku or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
You think yes?
I mean, so I'm like stepping back a little bit. I'm like pretty much exactly where you were with like, I mean, I loved Force Awakens. I adored it. I still do. My 3 complaints about that movie were the like cringy obvious callbacks, which were jarring the first time I saw them in the theater, and then like they just became part of the script as it went on, and like I'm pretty okay with them now. Starkiller Base as another Death Star, which I'm pretty like, I don't know. I think like Resistance is kind of what helped me like reconcile that in a weird way and like see it as its own entity by seeing it through another lens. Whereas like the first time I saw Force Awakens, I'm like, they're doing a third Death Star. Like,
yeah, it's really cool in Resistance. And I just want to say real quick that like intellectually, like I'm right there with you. But then like I will say, like for me, honestly, watching The Force Awakens, it never bothers me. Like it's like if I write it down on paper, it's like, yeah, that's dumb. There shouldn't be a third Death Star. But like once I'm into the movie and I'm like going along for it or whatever, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like I just, you know what I mean? Which is kind of sort of the same thing in Return of the Jedi too. It's sort of stupid that there's a second Death Star. You know what I mean? I mean, the third is adding insult to injury, but really the second one's pretty stupid too. So,
but
anyway,
like,
sorry.
And I mean, like, shout out to all the lives lost on Starkiller Base when it was destroyed. Maybe.
Because there had to be construction workers and like people in the kitchen, and I forget what they say in Clerks, but totally.
But like, I feel for them because like they're child soldiers, like taken from their families and like programmed. So I do have like this. I don't want to like make this another Clerks like rambling, but like, okay, shout out to the lives lost.
Wait, I thought
there.
you were actually joking when you were saying all this, but I mean, because it's true, but
yeah.
We should take that scene from Clerks and just rewrite it about the First Order.
No, we shouldn't. No, we should never do that. But like, Starkiller Base does give us like the best line ever in any movie ever. Like, because like this whole plot contrivance where like Starkiller Base needs sunlight to power up this like laser to like blow up the government. And like the part where like they're on this like timer, which is like, you know, it's just like the orbiting of the Death Star, you know, around the rebel base. Like, oh, it's almost in position. Like we have this like arbitrary timer here. But the fact that it's like once the Starkiller Base gets enough light, it will be ready to fire, and like that means it's sucked out the light from the sun completely. But then you have like Poe Dameron, regular dude, riding in here on his spaceship, ready to blow stuff up, and is like, as long as there's light, we got this. And like it's so perfect.
Yeah.
Like,
as long as there's light, we still have a chance, or something like that.
Yeah,
it says, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
It's, I mean, like, I will take that, like, kind of lame plot point if all of it was just like built around Oscar Isaac saying that one killer line. Like, it's worth it to me.
It is a killer line, especially when you think about the fact that really it's about Rey, but we didn't even know that at the time necessarily. But now that we think about it, he's talking about Rey. Like JJ knew that, Lawrence Kasdan knew that. You know what I mean?
Oh God.
You think I'm kidding, and I'm not.
No, I'm not either. Like, I'm trying to get my breath back so I can finally get to the point that I was trying to make. That those were my two of my 3 issues with The Force Awakens. And
I think your third has to do with Snoke.
Yeah, the third was the idea of Snoke as like a poor man's Palpatine. Like, oh, here's this like scary hologram man, and yeah, like, okay, he's pulling the strings of Kylo Ren in the same way that like the Emperor pulled the strings of Darth Vader. Like, that's lame. But then episode 8 comes along and it's like, actually, no.
No, it's fantastic in 2 ways, because number one, yeah, you watch The Force Awakens and you're like, yeah, like it's a bootleg Emperor. It's like a less scary, less interesting, less unique, you know, less well put together bootleg Emperor Palpatine. And then you see episode 8 and it's like, actually, old boy just cuts him in half halfway through the movie, and you're shocked, and it's awesome. Plus, he brings a lot more, Snoke himself brings a lot more kind of unique character to it in episode 8, where he's much more interesting in that movie, making fun of Kylo Ren, calling him a child in a mask and all that stuff. It's like so good, wearing gold slippers. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But really, it's like when you hear that laugh in the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, that it's like, it comes full circle and you're like, oh, it's actually brilliant. It's actually brilliant because, yeah, you know what? He did seem like a bootleg, you know, Palpatine. You know why? Because he was. Because Palpatine Palpatine was like in control all this time, or if not in control, it's like, you know, Snoke never was the big bad, because Palpatine has always been the big bad and still is the big bad, and that's so perfect. It's such a masterful, like, and the fact that we sat here, and when I say we, I mean Star Wars fans, but I also mean we, specifically us, sat here since 2015 talking into microphones about Star Wars, and like, oh my God, we're overanalyzing these movies like nonstop for 4 years straight, like, which we love to do. And really never were like, but really it's all Palpatine. We know that, right? Like we sat here and we dug in and we analyzed and we overanalyzed and we tried to sound smart and all this stuff for years. And guess what? Like, it was Palpatine. Totally. And it's so good. It is so good. And I keep trying to tell people, like friends of mine that don't like The Last Jedi, I'm like, wait till this whole thing's over, and I bet you'll look back at some of the stuff from The Last Jedi and be like, actually, it's great. And this is like such a good example of The Force Awakens. Like, I left that movie being like, Snoke sucks. And now in 2019, I'm like, Snoke is so good. And but it's because there were pieces that I wasn't able to put together and that hadn't been revealed yet. And guess what? They relate to Palpatine, as they usually do.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I definitely like kind of classify myself as like a smart idiot. Like, I recognize when, like, I feel like I have a good nose for like when something's good and like when there's like something there, and but like I can't always like articulate why or like fully understand it. So like I left The Last Jedi and I was like, man, that was amazing. And like the reasons I thought it was amazing was because like there was like really fantastic cinematography on display, of course, and some great character moments. But like the main thing, like my main takeaway was from that was like, whoa, everything I thought was gonna happen in this like sequel trilogy, that's not gonna happen anymore. I have no idea where we're at with all this. Like, I'm gonna leave it to the people smarter than me to, finish this off. Like, I don't envy that task because I I don't know how to end this story at this point. Like, there's no way that like I could end the Skywalker saga in a way that was satisfying to me, let alone millions of other fans. Like, and it's like, well, that sucks for them, but like, and like, it kind of just lingered there, and like I've just, for the past few months up until April, I was like, yeah, I like The Last Jedi. It subverted my expectations, and like it got me really more excited about episode 9. Like I have no idea what to expect, and that's really exciting for like, a fan of Star Wars. And then like we got to April, we got to Celebration, and then that Palpatine laugh happened, and like that's just like, well, I should have known. But like also here I am, like I had just started to like come up with these theories of like what was going to happen in episode 9 and what I was expecting to see, and nope. That would have been bad. Like these people got it figured out, and I think like that's that's so cool. Like that's what I want as someone consuming like any kind of entertainment. Like I want it to like if I can predict every line and every story beat, then like that's not like doing anything for me. Like that's not stretching me. Like that's not pushing me. It's not like growing my appreciation of something.
What it's not is it's not Star Wars, I think. And that's why a movie like The Last Jedi to me is so quintessentially Star Wars, because it's like if I would have walked out of that movie being like, yeah, I know exactly what that was, and I know exactly I didn't know how I felt about it the first night I came out of there. And I think that that's because it was a lot and it was challenging, as you said. It was challenging, and it wasn't what I expected in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways it was, but in a lot of ways it wasn't. And I'm scared of the day that I come out of a big sort of saga level Star Wars movie and think just like, yep, that's exactly what I thought it would be. Straightforward, not a lot to really think about, or to argue about, or to kind of dig into. Like that would be a major disappointment to me. If I go see the Rise of Skywalker and it goes in directions I didn't expect it to go into, and it does some stuff that I don't agree with even, to me that's a way better outcome than I go see that movie and I feel the way about it that I do about a lot of big blockbuster movies I go to, which is just like, yeah, it kept my attention for 2 hours, but I don't really ever need to think about it again, or I have no interest in really watching it again because it's just what I expected it to be. That would be a nightmare, I feel like, for a Star Wars movie. And so I can, maybe for one of the first times, I guess I can kind of empathize a little more with the argument that The Force Awakens is, too similar to the original trilogy. I don't feel that way. I love that movie. I really enjoy it. And I do think it has some really intriguing ideas, and there's a lot of depth and emotion to it, and it's a beautiful movie, I think. But if somebody left that movie feeling like it didn't challenge me and it was very just kind of, I would never use this word to describe The Force Awakens, but if people felt like it was too generic or something, I could see where that's a big disappointment, because I don't think Star Wars should be that, you know, and I think it rarely has been that as far as movies are concerned. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we need it to be challenging. We need it to be, you know, kind of, you know, not what we'd expect, as you said.
Yeah. And I guess to kind of like bring this all around back to like our topic, which like it needs to be what we don't expect, but then it also needs to like make sense. Like because there are things in Star Wars and you know like there's stuff in like the animation specifically. There was stuff back in like the old EU um where like it goes in a place like I didn't expect, but I don't always know if like Star Wars is better for it, or if like my experience with Star Wars is better for it. So like I think about like some of the things that are still controversial in my mind, and like there and it may just be because like I don't have the whole story yet. But like something that we've talked about a lot of times on this show that like I don't think either of us are totally sold on is like the world between worlds in Rebels. Like that's something like I'm still not 100% sold on. There's other stuff that's like way out there that like I've kind of come around to in like the years, like the Mortis stuff. Like that's actually like the most recent time I watched that. Um, you know, it I was like, yeah, I kind of get this. Like this kind of works. I like this perspective on this like you know, theological concept within Star Wars. But I think with with Palpatine coming back, like I I mean I feel like the general feeling, at least like it's hard to say because that was such like a moment in time, like those especially that first night kind of um you know like taking in that like knowledge that like this is a thing this is happening whether you like it or not, like where you know this isn't just someone's theory that they you know posted on Reddit or something. Like this is what's happening. Like Palpatine is in some way a part of this, and I think like our first impulse was to like go to like the how, and I think that was like that first night of you know discussions of Sith artifacts and clones and everything. Shout out to clones, but you know, like all that is like the how of it, but like really, I don't know. But there's also just that part that's just that feeling of like, yeah, like this, you know, this makes sense. Like, and then, you know, you kind of like build on that feeling by being like, here's rationale, here's evidence to like why this makes sense. Um, and then like it, you know, it becomes more solidified, I guess, for yourself and maybe for others around you if you like convince them on it. But like I don't know, like for me, like Palpatine just like is like Palpatine in the sequel trilogy just is like that's like you know that's just the natural conclusion to all of this, and I think
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. I think now that we heard his laugh in the trailer, and now that we know he's involved in some way, it feels like if he weren't, it would be like an injustice. It would be wrong. Like, how could you wrap it
Yeah.
up without him? In the same way that I don't know for sure that Anakin will be involved in any concrete way in the Rise of Skywalker, but
Mhm.
I think it's much more likely than not. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, we've kind of always had Force Ghosts, so you can kind of there you go, like Force Ghosts, whatever. And so it's a little more expected with like Anakin or Yoda. Like when Yoda showed up in the Last Jedi,
Mhm.
I'd heard some rumors. I knew that Frank Oz had been on the set or whatever, so I kind of
Mhm.
expected it. But still, my wife was sitting next to me and like Luke was walking up that hill or whatever, and you just like even right before I can't remember if it was the music or what it was, but like before you even saw like the corner of the ear or whatever it was that you
Yeah.
first see, I was like, I think it's gonna happen now. I remember telling her like, I think he's about to show. I think it's gonna be Yoda, and it was. And it's partially because of like the vibes the movie was giving me, and partially, like I said, because I'd
Yeah.
heard rumors and stuff. But yeah, with all those characters and all that kind of thing, it's like, well, you kind of half expected or whatever. But I didn't with Palpatine. But now it's like, how could they not? They have to. You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
it's so good. Yeah. Um, and you just said, Ryan, like the how is not so important. Although that being said, I did kind of want to wrap up the show with
Mhm.
guesses about how. But one more question before we get to that. What do you think Palpatine's involvement with the Ben Solo / Kylo Ren situation is? Do you have any thoughts about that? Because um, we say like, oh well, Palpatine's really super critical to the saga and it's like really important. Now that we know he's going to be in there, it's like, of course, he has to be. It's so important that he is. But boy, I mean, if anybody's story is integral and important to the Rise of Skywalker, I think it's Kylo Ren's. And so I
Mhm.
wonder, like, what is the link between those two characters? Is there a link? Um, like, do you buy into the idea that perhaps it was Palpatine all along who was twisting Ben's heart, or who was like when Ben or Kylo Ren or whatever is like thinks he's talking to Vader's helmet, you know, is Palpatine involved in that in some way? Um, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, like I said earlier, like I'm a smart idiot and I can get like halfway to any conclusion, but I
Uh,
always need someone to like kind of take me home on that. Um so I think we talked about um like I think you put it really well when you were talking about like how hurtful it was for Vader to be cast aside in favor of like the newer model, which was Luke. And then, that obviously didn't pan out. So, like if he wants that Skywalker blood, the next like obvious pick would be Kylo Ren. Um who, has that same kind of like innate natural ability as Anakin and Luke. Also has like, like the same sort of like fire and like drive as them, and like the willingness to kind of pursue um the more spiritual sides of things, because as we know, like it this whole time it could have been Leia, for all of this. And and like Palpatine like also teased that, like you know as well. But like we've also known that like Leia's heart was never really into developing her like force abilities. Like she had them to a degree, and but like she grew up in like a household of politicians, and I think like that's an area that's like super well explored in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Bloodline. Like, that is her passion, and her like the Senate is her Dagobah. Like, that's that's her thing. So, like, I mean, the only other obvious pick for Palpatine would be Kylo Ren. And then we get into the challenges of the how. Like, he's the Emperor is
he's dead.
Dead.
Yeah, he's dead
by the time Kylo Ren is born. So that's that's one of those things where, like, I can't put those pieces together. But, like, of course, like, if Palpatine had a chance, like, of course he'd want to get at Ben Solo. And we do know, it was kind of established during The Last Jedi that it is possible to link people's minds, to plant things in people's minds, plant seeds of ideas and seeds of relationships. And I think that's a concept that I feel like has, a lot of space to be explored in Star Wars. I don't know if it'll happen in Episode 9, and it could be like an integral part, or it could be something like we see in novels down the road. Like, who knows? But yeah, I mean, absolutely, the Emperor would want Ben Solo, and it's just the how that eludes me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for sure the Emperor would want him. As far as what I would want, or what I kind of, and some of this is just stuff that I've been thinking about, like, in the last few minutes as we've been talking about this, but I think I like the idea more that Snoke truly is the one who, twisted Ben's heart, as Luke said, or whatever it is, like, tempted him to the dark side, just because it's like, well, if it was Palpatine, it's like, all right, so Palpatine, kind of manipulated Anakin, and now, 50 years later, he's manipulating, or 30 years later, whatever it is, he's manipulating, no, it'd be more than that, whatever, is manipulating Kylo or Ben now too. I kind of like the idea that, like, Ben's mistake or Kylo's mistake echoes Anakin's mistake more than it's just like, oh, the same guy manipulated both of them, because it's more of like a reflection or like an echo, I think, if it's, two different parties versus, well, I got your granddad and now I'm getting you, you know what I mean? So I like that, like, he almost fell into the same trap in some ways that his grandfather did, but without it being the same person who was doing that to him. Potentially, I don't know. I'm sure it could work either way, or that, they could do it and it would be really good, I'm sure. But just, preferences, I'm thinking kind of that. And then the other thing that some of your comments sort of brought to mind for me, Ryan, is, earlier we'd been talking about, like, well, Anakin's flaw, like his tragic flaw or whatever, is that he wanted to control everything. So now, like, Anakin has retained, we think, his identity in the Force. We see him as a Force ghost in Return of the Jedi. And it's like, well, why wouldn't he have told Kylo, hey, don't make the same mistake I did? Hey, I was like you and I turned to the dark side and I shouldn't have. Hey, Rey's right, join her, whatever. Like, why isn't Anakin doing those things? And, like, how poetic is it? How beautiful is it if it's like, wherever he is and whatever he is at this point in his existence is sort of like, no, I can't control this. I need to not try to dictate the outcome of this situation. I need to have faith in him. I need to have faith in, the Force, etc. And I can't get involved. You know what I mean? And how beautiful is that as an idea, especially then if you think about Luke in The Last Jedi and the fact that Luke is like, I can't get involved. I can't try to control this. When I do that, it causes problems. I need to let this go and have faith in these other people that they'll make the right choices. Like, that's pretty legit stuff. That's pretty good if that's kind of what they're doing with this. And to sort of echo what you were saying, Ryan, it's not like, the smart idiot. It's like, I didn't come up with that, but I'm maybe thinking from looking at the stuff that they've put into place that like they did, and I'm pretty into it, you know.
Yeah, and I think to like your first point about maybe it being Snoke, who who really did mastermind the fall of Ben Solo. I think like that's another thing where like the idea that perhaps if Snoke was a protege of the Emperor, like I don't know, like maybe you know who knows? I mean, maybe the story is that um 5 years before, like when the Emperor was putting his contingency plans into place, he was like, hey, we don't know Snoke's first name, unfortunately.
I think it's
Hey,
Robert, isn't it?
Sheev Snoke. um, you know, something. I
No,
see
no,
your
no, no, no. I got it here. I looked it up. It's Frank. It is Frank. Yeah, Frank Snoke.
Okay. Um, it's better if it's a weird Lucas word though, like Sheev.
Well, okay, but I don't think Lucas came up with Sheev. Sheev never showed up
Okay.
anywhere until like 2 years ago.
No, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I want an etymology of like Star Wars words. Like that is a book that should exist. But anyways, so like if Emperor's talking to Frank Snoke uh over a couple cold ones, he's like, oh man, I'm about to like get this Skywalker kid because this other Skywalker, like he's like a rusted bucket of bolts over here. Like he's barely doing anything at this point. Like I'm gonna get this like young Skywalker. Like, hey Frank, you got to get you one of those Skywalkers. Like if you're gonna continue my legacy.
So he manipulates Snoke
And
into thinking Snoke wants to get a Skywalker, even though it's really like just him wanting another Skywalker, like overall.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
like that. No, I like that.
Yeah, like
I like that, or I like just the idea that like Snoke learned everything from Palpatine, and so like almost inadvertently is doing what Palpatine would do, and then
yeah.
Palpatine is able to take advantage of that. You know?
But there's got to be something to like this is the Skywalker saga, the mighty Skywalker blood. Like Snoke has to be like rolling into it knowing like, oh man, this is the kid.
Oh,
Like
100%, 100%.
independent of Palpatine.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
And then I was gonna make a point to your second point, but I don't remember what your second point was.
Anakin like learning in the afterlife that he can't control things.
Yes. So if Anakin's whole thing was like control of systems, control of, everything, like just like, tight gripped control, it almost seems like Ben Solo is rolling in like destruction of these systems, like destruction of dogma, destruction of, everything. Like these two sides of the same coin, like, destroy both of them. Like just, like your relationships with people, family, like allegiances, like all of that. Like that seems to be like that's kind of my takeaway of his like throne room rant.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where they go with him as the supreme leader, as we assume that he will be, because it's like he does seem more intent on destroying things, I guess, than controlling them. And it always has felt weird, Kylo Ren is part of the First Order because he talks the talk in The Force Awakens, I suppose, but it just doesn't ever really feel like that's something that would matter that much to him. Like, that power in the way that it did clearly to Palpatine and to Snoke. maybe I'm off on that, but it just doesn't seem like he would
No.
really care that much about controlling all these systems and controlling the galaxy. But he's going to have to as the new supreme leader. And I would say, I guess, like, I suppose in the final scenes of The Last Jedi, his goal is to destroy his uncle. And if you want to be less generous towards him, I don't know if there's as much evidence, but to destroy his mother. And if not that, at least to destroy the resistance for sure. He definitely wants to kill Luke. He wants Luke dead, and he wants the resistance wiped out completely. And so I guess on a micro level, that's, control, but it's definitely destruction too, right? So I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see where they go with him as far as that goes, because I think that's one of the big questions coming out of The Last Jedi is like, well, this guy doesn't necessarily seem like he wanted to be in Snoke's position. He worked for Snoke, but he didn't necessarily seem like, his long-term career goals were to be Snoke in the future.
Yeah.
But he made himself that pretty quickly. And so then the question is, will he lean into that? Will he become more controlling? Will he have more interest in the politics of the First Order? And if not, then what does that mean for the First Order,
Yeah, I think like it's completely like he's from being like a subordinate to Snoke to like his position as the supreme leader, like all of his positions within the First Order have just been to like accomplish his personal goals. Like it has nothing to do with the, I don't think like he's just super into the beliefs of the First Order. Like he even says to Rey, like, let's just get rid of the First Order. Let's get rid of the Resistance, the Jedi, the Sith, like all of that. Like, who cares? And I think like but like we still don't really know like what exactly Ben Solo wants, really, because it seems like he wants different things at different times.
Yeah, even that moment, and I'm gonna, I could be really wrong here, maybe I am, but I remember him in that moment being like, the Jedi, the rebellion, the resistance, the Emperor or the Empire, whatever, Snoke. Does he ever say the First Order? Like, let's just forget about the First Order. I don't know if he actually says the First Order there, but he might though. I mean, he definitely, it feels like that's like what he's saying, but I don't know if he actually includes the First Order in that list or not. But even if he does or he doesn't or whatever, it's like that really feels like his join me and together we can rule the galaxy together, sort of moment. Like, what is he asking her to do if it's not join him to be in control of everything? What would she be joining him to do? You know what I mean? He has killed Snoke. He has, I guess at that point, he hasn't yet told Hux, like, no, you're not the supreme leader, I am. But I mean, everything he does from that moment on, and before that, really, to me, is like, yeah, no, I'm going to be in charge. You know what I mean? So, and I know that almost directly contradicts what I had just said a minute ago, which is that it doesn't seem like that's what he wants. But at the same time, like you watch The Last Jedi from that point on, and I don't think you see anything that would contradict the idea that that's what he wants either. You know what I mean? He reaches for it in every possible way. So I don't know. But I still haven't. There's enough question for me though that I'm like, does he want it? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's tough to say. I think it's ambiguous, or it's unclear kind of where he's going to go as far as that lust for power or whatever is concerned. Maybe his motivations seem more genuine or more ideologically sound isn't the right word, but I don't know, pure, than just like, I want to be in charge. But I don't know. He does seem like he wants to be in charge at the same time, like he does and he doesn't, I feel like.
It's almost like he wants to be in charge just so like he doesn't have to go through anyone else, like to get the things that he thinks he wants.
Yeah, maybe.
I think, obviously there's some confusion there, but
yeah.
Anyways, this was our episode on Sheev Palpatine.
Wait a minute. We're almost done. Yeah. But we always do this, don't we? Like but that's because Star Wars is so rich, Brian. There's so much to talk about as far as it all goes.
Dual protagonists of the sequel trilogy, it always kind of comes back to them because they're really good.
Yeah. Okay. I want to share an email from our friend Mike Harris.
Which Mike Harris?
Mike Harris. I don't. How do you differentiate him? I don't know. It's Mike Harris.
Mike Harris that we
not rocked in Mike Harris
hung out with at Celebration, or the Mike Harris that we just missed at Celebration?
The Mike Harris we hung out with.
Okay.
Yes, but the Mike Harris that I just missed last weekend at Star Wars Days in Joliet.
Oh,
yes, it sucks that I didn't get to meet up with him again. I was running behind, got there too late, screwed up. I missed the parade. I missed a bunch of cool stuff. Missed Mike. It was lame.
Wow,
and that was my bad. Yeah. But Joliet Star Wars Day was awesome. It was really, really cool. If you live in the Midwest, if you live like within like 2 or 3 hours of Joliet, Illinois, I would really recommend going to it. It's like a mini Star Wars celebration. It's so cool. It happens in Joliet, Illinois, every late May or early June, and you should go. It's really cool. And anyways, Mike was there because he lives near there, and I live a little less near there, but still pretty close. And so we almost crossed paths, and we didn't, which sucks. But Mike was. Or Mike did respond to our call for feedback on the last Sheev episode. So he wrote us. Yeah, he wrote us and he said, "Hey, John and Ryan, I'm enjoying your deep dive into the one and only Emperor Palpatine. And I was so shocked to hear his laugh in that trailer. And I, for one, am glad he's back in The Rise of Skywalker. I still have a soft spot in my heart for Dark Empire. But like you, John, I don't want to see him return as a clone in episode 9. Suck it, Ryan." Okay, that's my comment. Suck it, Ryan. Mike didn't write that. I said that. Yeah, Mike didn't say
that. For listeners, I'm giving a big thumbs down.
Yeah,
no clones. Like just saying.
I would too if somebody just was like, "Suck it, Ryan." Anyway, I'd rather it be done in a different way. At first, I just assumed they do it as some kind of vision or force back, but they could go the route they've been exploring in some of the comics lately. So actually what you had brought up earlier, Ryan, the Sith aren't able to come back as Force ghosts per se, at least not like Jedi, but can attach themselves to objects or places.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. That would be cool to see.
Darth Vader.
Right. That would be cool to see. Okay. That'd be cool to see on screen. I trust JJ and company to pull it off no matter what they go with. Take care, and may the Force be with you. So thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah.
It's awesome to hear from you. Sorry I missed you at Joliet Star Wars Days, but yeah, I think like we're pretty much both right on board with Mike's comment there, other than the no clones thing, which you would push back on, Ryan. But I'm
just saying, like, there's a lot of possibilities out there.
Yeah, the truth is out there, and it has nothing to do with clones. But I think Mike is right to point to some of the evidence, as you did, earlier, Ryan.
Yeah, when talking about Master Sifo-Dyas and his order back in the previous episode.
How good is Ewan McGregor's delivery in that part when he's like, "Master"? Actually, how good is that Kaminoan's delivery too? And just like, "Master Sifo-Dyas." Everybody's so confused and trying to save face in that moment.
How good is?
And people say the prequels aren't good. Yeah, no, but I mean, because there is the possibility, as Mike points out in his email, that like, what if it is just like Palpatine's back in some like, flashback or force back or whatever. Yeah. And that could be the case, but I don't think they would do that and make a big deal out of it like they did, if it was just like, oh, he shows up for 30 seconds in a memory or a flashback, I just don't think they would have, put the spotlight on him the way they did at Celebration. So I think it's got to be bigger than that. And I'm with Mike. I think some kind of force or not force, but like Sith haunting or Sith possession even is the way they'll go.
I love it. Like I love the idea that Palpatine ordered an unaltered clone for himself when he was putting in that clone army order, and he's like, okay, give me a boba, and give me a me, and then like all these like other dudes, like like I got the credits here, like it's cool. I like that just because like it ties back to my favorite Star Wars movie, Episode 2, Attack of the Clones.
It is not your favorite Star Wars movie. Stop.
It's absolutely my favorite Star Wars movie.
No, it's not.
And it gives that shout out to that film, and that's really exciting. And I think that's like a good way to close out the Skywalker sagas, to get people like really thinking about Attack of the Clones.
I'm sure that's JJ's number one priority, is to get him thinking about Attack of the Clones.
Like, if you're not appeasing those AOTC fans, like this movie is doomed from the start. Like, why even bother? But I also like, I love this idea of like creepy magic and castles and artifacts and like hauntings and all of that stuff. Like that is so good, and that sets up Star Wars for both the future and the past. Because like, this stuff, again, like basically like it's now like a directive, like everyone needs to go read Charles Soule's Lando miniseries and then read his Darth Vader run, especially the last arc. But like, because it sets up like the potential to like we're in like a present-ish time, and these artifacts are showing up, and there's these like hauntings and stuff, but then like we get like a little bit of backstory, but like how cool would it be if like some of that stuff tied into, whatever, if like Benioff and Wise are doing their like pre Star Wars thing. Like, how cool would it be if like we see like those artifacts like being part of that present and stuff, like that's the kind of stuff that like gets me. And then like, that leads to potential in the future as well, because like this stuff, it exists. Like Palpatine took a long time, like, collecting all this, and like was using it for something. He had it for a reason. So,
yeah. That was one thing I didn't like as I was reading back through the contingency plan or whatever. I was like, or the Project Cinder and all that stuff, is like in the Aftermath books, like they were pouring Sith artifacts like down into the core of Jakku to like set off a reaction or something. And I was like, wait, don't break those things. Don't melt them down. Don't destroy them. What's going on here? Like, I didn't like that. Like, we're just going to use them as ammunition. We're just start dumping Sith artifacts down into the core of the planet. Like, I couldn't go for that part, but
Star Wars is wild.
It is wild. I think it's going to be wild in 6 months when we go to see the rise of Skywalker. And not only is the planet Mustafar featured in the movie, but Vader's castle is featured in the film. I'm saying right now, I think 75% chance Vader's castle's in the movie, and I think Kylo Ren's going to go there, and it's going to be awesome.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh my god! There's no cameo I want more in Star Wars Episode 9 than Vader's castle.
Oh, okay. So we're not going with like, I thought you were going to say Hayden Christensen or something, but like, no, you want the castle.
I will take that castle over Hayden. Mm-hmm. I will take that castle over Padme, over resurrected robot spider leg Han Solo. Like, dude, I will even take that castle over thrice resurrected Darth Maul.
All right, we got to end this episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. You can check out everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. Please email us, as our friend Mike did, at blockaderunner blockadepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at Blockade Run. Ryan, you are on Twitter
at Brandwarf, BRAWNDWARF.
All right. Tomorrow, late morning, early afternoon, I think, Ryan, EA is showing off some gameplay footage for the first time of Jedi Fallen Order. So I wouldn't be shocked if we were back next week with some discussion of that footage and that game, as well as maybe other things. But we've been doing weekly, which is great. I don't know if we've ever said the word weekly out loud. But since we missed our first week since January, now seems like the time to say it. We've been weekly.
We are a weekly podcast, except when we're not.
Well, yeah, which is once since January.
No, okay. Good. To be fair, yeah, like I literally had no voice. I had like the sorest throat, and it hurt so much to talk. And I was like it would have actually been really appropriate for the Palpatine episode. Because it was kind of like that, but also a frog.
Yeah, I didn't bring it up because I think it's a problem that we missed that one episode. But what I'm saying is like, yeah, we'll be back next week because we're here.
Well, you have other friends.
I do. Yeah, you're right. I could have.
John, do you have other friends that you could record in this one?
I do. Yes, I do. I do have other friends. They're harder to get to like sit down and talk to me about Star Wars, but I do have other friends.
Like I don't live in the same city as you, but like I could help you meet people.
Okay. Yeah.
I could maybe introduce you to some people on the internet.
Okay, cool. Step 1, engage me in 2-hour plus long podcasts that no one will listen to the end of. Should make me, I've made a lot of friends this way. So actually, I think like this might be your Sheev Palpatine manipulation tactic. Like you'll never make another friend because I will tie you up in these 2-hour plus podcasts.
How could you possibly record an episode of this show without me?
You're just straight up an hour over the length of a podcast that anyone would actually listen to. So you're stuck with me, man. Nobody's ever going to be your friend again. Maybe that's the point.
Want to go see an opera?